It's Tuesday, and that means it's time for terror.
We were on day 5 of our trek deep into the heart of the Peruvian jungle in search of the lost temple of Supai. Above us, the canopy of trees provided little shade as we crossed small rivers and streams in the murky daylight. Our expedition to the unknown recesses of a place time had forgotten was led by Dr. Madsen, a world-renowned archaeologist from Miskatonic University. I, Dr. Jeffrey Bourne, took second in command, and with us came our 3 guides, Pedro, Miguel, and Jutjut, all of Peruvian heritage. We were in search of the lost gold mask of Supai, the ancient god of death. After years of research in the archives of Miskatonic University, Dr. Madsen had come to the conclusion that there must still be a small, hidden ancient temple dedicated to Supai, located deep within the Peruvian Amazon. So far we had found no trace of this temple, and I was beginning to feel as if this dangerous expedition to the unknown was for naught. My collar itched and I swatted away another mosquito for the 1000th time. Thank science, we had all received our malaria shots before embarking on this seemingly doomed crusade. As we crossed the threshold into darker jungle, suddenly Jutjut stopped us in our tracks. "Dr. Madsen, Dr. Bourne, come look," he said, pointing at the ground. There in the dirt was the unmistakable prints of what appeared to be a large jaguar. Jutjut mentioned with his hands the large size of the tracks. "We go no further today. If jaguar is hunting, it will smell us," Jutjut warned. "Blast it, Jutjut. We have pistols and rifles, and the sun is still overhead. We have much ground still to cover until we reach the temple," replied Dr. Madsen. Jutjut grunted his dissent, but it was to no avail. Dr. Madsen was hell-bent on recovering the gold mask of Supai in as timely manner as possible, and Madsen, being the one to fund this expedition, had final say. Deeper into the jungle, full of whistling toucans and constantly chattering howler monkeys, we proceeded. Further and further into the Amazon jungle, we struggled with our backpacks, weighing us down, but our supplies were crucial to our survival. Pedro Miguel took the lead as Jutjut brought up the rear. Hours passed in the damp confines of this twisted maze of kapok trees, strangler figs, and rubber trees. The heat of the jungle was oppressive. Finally, with dusk approaching, Dr. Madsen called for us to stop and set up camp for the evening. As he went over his journals and notes and maps, the rest of us set about starting a fire and preparing our MREs, or meal ready to eat kits. Tonight I was having mashed potatoes and powdered steak that looked like mud and tasted like runny eggs, but it was better than starving to death, I suppose. From the depths of the jungle we heard the roar of a jaguar, low and guttural. "You see, Jutjut, nothing to fear. That jaguar of ours found itself an easier meal than the 5 of us," chided Dr. Madsen, spitting on the ground in Jutjut's direction. Jutjut merely scowled and went off to collect more firewood. Pedro and Miguel each lit a rolled cigarette. "If your pay wasn't so good, I'd leave first chance I got. Seeking the temple of the death god is madness," said Miguel to Madsen. "When I discover the lost temple of Supai and recover the gold mask, you'll be jumping out of your boots with joy, my dear Miguel," replied the doctor. Night came quickly for us in the jungle, an all-encompassing darkness that shrouded the land in terror of what could be lurking just outside the pathetic light of the fire. As I drank from my canteen a deep swig of water, I heard a strange noise off in the Peruvian wilderness. A low croaking sound, rhythmic and deep, it came, followed by a large stomping noises. "Jutjut, what do you make of that?" I asked the lanky, darkly tanned guide. "To be honest, Dr. Bourne, I have no idea. The sounds of the jungle will play with your mind at night time," he replied. "Enough chatter, men! I need sleep!" commanded Dr. Madsen. One by one, we all nestled into our hammocks, wary of what insects may sting us in the night. As was our custom, one man would stay up on watch and stoke the fire until the next man's turn. Again I heard the strange thumping noise grow closer, followed by the guttural croaking sound. As dawn broke, I was wakened to the camp in disarray and panic. Jutjut was apparently missing. "Damn that man! Can't find good help these days. Must have abandoned us in the middle of the night, afraid of the glorious discovery we are sure to make any day now. Well, good riddance to the coward. He was only slowing us down," yelled Dr. Madsen, at no one in particular. Pedro whistled low and spoke up. Jut Jut would not leave us like that. He is one of the best lead jungle guides I know. Why, I once saw him swim through piranha-infested waters just to save a woman's toddler from certain death. Dr. Madsen glowered at the assistant guide. Huh! Well, it looks like you've been promoted to lead guide, Pedro, replied Madsen. Break up camp. We head out immediately. No time to waste looking for that traitor now. And so we did as commanded by the overbearing doctor and continued our quest deeper into the Peruvian jungle, full of terror. As we trekked single file down a small trail, I overheard Miguel and Pedro talking quietly to one another. Did you notice those strange tracks near our camp last night, Miguel? Asked Pedro. See, 4 large elongated toes with what looked like suction cups on the ends, replied Miguel. Strange, I myself had not noticed these tracks, but Madsen gave us little time this morning to investigate Jut Jut's disappearance. I hope nothing bad had happened to the trusted guide, and that indeed it was only nerves that got the best of him, forcing him to turn back. I gripped my pack strap and touched my holster, reassuring myself that my pistol was handy in case danger came for us. Late into the afternoon, we ventured onwards, using our machetes to hack through the undergrowth of this damp and humid place, when suddenly Madsen pushed us all to the side with excitement and glee. Hacking the vines, he uncovered a statue on our path. Do you see? Do you see, men? Why, this shows the way to the temple. Look at the intricate carvings. Why, based on my extensive knowledge, this seems to indicate that the temple is just beyond that small hillock over there, he said, pointing to the east. I ushered up to the statue and explored its strange carvings. It showed a temple, and the top was indeed what appeared to be a grisly mask above it. Beneath the temple, large round creatures sat. Madsen began to hack further into the vines and brush with a renewed frenzy of excitement at this discovery, wanting to reach the temple by nightfall. Wearily, myself and the 2 guides followed behind him. The sun had now begun to set over the horizon when we came across the dilapidated ruins of the temple. Pedro spoke up. Dr. Madsen, we have found the Temple of Supai, the death god, but I caution that we should wait till morning to explore. We know not what we may find within. Madsen spun on his heel to look at the man. Nonsense! I've trekked halfway across this godforsaken jungle to find the gold mask of Supai. I will not wait a minute longer, he screamed, and began to climb up the stone stairs toward the entrance. Myself, Miguel, and Pedro waited behind, beginning to set up camp at the foot of the temple. As we did, I heard the strange croaking noises emanate from nearby. This time they were louder and more pronounced. I shot a glance at the 2 guides, but both men seemed unfazed. Night descended, and as it did, still no sign of Dr. Madsen. The flames of the fire licked the cold night air as we sat around the fire awaiting Madsen's return. He's been gone hours now. Perhaps he's injured himself, questioned Miguel. I looked upwards towards the ruins and replied, if he has, then he shouldn't have been so reckless in his pursuit of lost treasures then. Both men nodded in agreement. Suddenly from the temple entrance emerged the doctor, screaming incoherently, waving a gold mask that was both brilliant yet hideous to behold. I found it! But the Guardians found me! We need to get out of here now! His voice was deadened by the canopy above. We all looked at him in shock and terror as a large, round shape pushed itself through the entranceway. It was hideous and bright orange with green stripes running down its sides. Its eyes were oversized and bulbous, its mouth a meter wide. It croaked hoarsely and lashed its tongue out towards the scrambling Madsen. By inches it missed its prey. The thing was a giant frog. Then from the underbrush of the jungle I heard more croaks and thumping, as if more of the brutes were jumping towards us. I raised my pistol and peered towards the dark jungle trees, seeing nothing. Miguel raised his rifle as Pedro unholstered his pistol. It's the servants of Supai, the death god, come to devour us all for desecrating his temple, he yelled and fired blindly at the frog the size of a Volkswagen Bug as it lumbered down the temple steps. This expedition is one of death and destruction. These behemoths must have been the ones that took Jut Jut, said Miguel. Dr. Madsen tripped and fell at the very last step. The golden mask bounced and rolled, landing at my feet. Before anyone could do anything, the giant frog landed behind him, lashing out its hideous malformed tongue and wrapping around him like a python, sucking the greedy doctor into its wide gaping maw. Madsen screamed as the beast clamped its jaws down upon him, devouring him whole. I fired my pistol, but to no effect. Then from my left and right, 2 more giant lumbering frogs emerged from the jungle. Miguel screamed and went to run, but one of the creatures was upon him as if in a blood frenzy. Its mouth snapped down upon his torso. His legs were sheared off and fell to the ground in a bloody mess. Pedro began to fire shot after shot at the frog mere feet away from him, but to no effect. This one jumped up with surprising speed, clinging to a tree with his suction cup-like feet, then bounded straight down on top of the guide. He had no time to scream as he splattered underneath its massive weight. I looked to my left, then right, then straight ahead. I was surrounded by the dread monsters on all sides. Then something clicked in my head, and I remember one of the myths about the mask that Dr. Manson would drone on about for hours. The mask! The golden mask of Suppai! I reached to the ground and put it upon my head, covering my face. I turned towards the massive frogs and began to imitate a croaking noise as best I could. I waved my arms above my head to look bigger. Then I was, and continued the croaking sounds. At first they looked at me with blank, hideous eyes. Then slowly, one by one, they each returned back into the jungle. I had done it. I had convinced the guardian of Suppai's temple that I was the death god, thus narrowly avoiding a horrible death at their frenzied maws. But, dear listener, my tale does not end here, but continues further, for even though I survived the attack by these man-eating giant frogs, I still had to navigate my way out of the Peruvian jungle with nearly no supplies left and no guide to lead the way. But that's a tale for another time.
And now, a special story submitted by one of our longtime listeners, Danny. Here's a tale I like to call An Offer She Couldn't Refuse.
Nervously, I dialed my boss's number, and it felt like forever until he picked up. "Hey, Jill, how you doing?" asked my boss. Good. I guess I was just wondering if there was any extra shifts to pick up this week," I replied. I could hear Roger calculating in his head whether there were or not. Finally, he spoke. "Well, shit, you know what? We got that karaoke event this Wednesday, and yeah, I guess we could use an extra bartender, just in case it really heats up." I thanked my boss for the extra shift, told him I'd see him Wednesday, and went about my day. As I went through my stacks of mail and unpaid bills, I came across one for my student loan. With a groan, I opened the envelope, only to see that I still owed at least $127,000. This was one of the main reasons I was so eager to pick up extra shifts at the bar where I worked. If I could pay some of this off before I hit retirement age, I'd be living the dream, I mused, and ruffled my cat Boo Boo's ears as he cuddled next to me on the couch. "Boo Boo, I need a miracle to get out of this debt," I told my cat, who looked at me with the disinterest only cats can. Before I knew it, Wednesday had arrived, and I was pulling into the parking lot of the Golden Skull Saloon, an older pub that had been around since at least the 50s. I hopped out of my car and headed towards the entrance, not wanting to be late. Tonight was dedicated to 1980s glam rock karaoke. I couldn't stand 80s rock, but I also couldn't stand being so far in debt, so I swallowed my disgust and put on my apron and took my place behind the bar. At first it was a slow night, not much action, just a few rednecks and the usual barflies milling about as one heavyset fella belted out White Snake and Poison and Guns N' Roses' best hits, poorly might I add. While I was cleaning the bar, the overhead lights began to flicker, then died for about 5 seconds before coming back on. Great, I thought. Either this old bar has finally fallen apart on me, or a storm was rolling in. I looked up suddenly from wiping the bar to be startled. Sitting before me was a man in his mid-50s, wearing a beautiful corn blue suit with burgundy tie and matching handkerchief. His eyes were a translucent blue that I couldn't help but stare at. His hair was a deep black and slicked backwards. All in all, he reminded me of a classic gangster type from the 1960s. I didn't see or hear him come in. It was as if he had materialized out of thin air, sitting at a stool directly in front of me. The man grinned widely at me and spoke up. "Evening, darling. I think I'll have a martini served clean and neat, if you don't mind." His grin was infectious. I merely nodded and fixed him his drink, clean and neat, just the way he ordered it. Most of my patrons just sucked back on beer or whiskey shots, but this strange man had an air of sophistication to him, as if he was someone important. I handed him his martini. "That'll be $8.95, I said. Again the man grinned and fished out a $20 bill and slapped it down on the counter. "Keep the change, missy. I know how hard times can be these days," he said to me with a hint of otherworldly strangeness in his magnetic blue eyes. It was as if this man knew me somehow, but I know I'd never seen him before. Weird, I thought, and went back to serving other customers as the karaoke singers butchered their favorite songs. Business picked up. More and more patrons came in. Before I knew it, we were on last call. As customers pony up to the bar for one last round, I noticed the strange man in the corn blue suit pulling out a rather expensive-looking pen. Once again, the lights flickered and darkness enshrouded the bar for at least 10 seconds this time before the lights came back on, and when they did, standing before me was the strange man. "Darling, I have something for you," he said with a grin. I involuntarily took a step back. Just my luck, this guy was going to turn out to be another creep, I thought. The man fished into his suit jacket and removed what looked like a contract and placed it on the counter before me. My brow furrowed, but sudden curiosity took the best of me, and I inquired, "What's this all about?" The man ran his fingers through his hair and looked deep into my eyes. "If you're willing to face your greatest fears, then all your problems will go away. No more debts, fears, or frustrations," he replied and continued on. "All you have to do is sign here, and I'll take care of the rest." I looked down at the contract, then back at the man in the nice cut suit. What are you talking about, sir? How can you fix all my problems?" I asked. He merely smiled and chuckled to himself lightly. "Oh dear Jill, consider this a chance to be rid of all your fears and worries in one fell swoop. I mean, what's the harm in signing a little old piece of paper?" he replied. I looked nervously around the bar at the patrons, but they were all busy drinking and hooting and hollering, and it was as if in this moment the only people to exist were me and the strange man before me. I thought it over. Imagine. Just have to face my deepest fears, and no more worries about money or student loans ever again. This sounded too good to be true, but then again, what harm could there really be? He was probably just a drunk weirdo pulling my arm anyway. I picked up the expensive gold-plated pen and signed the bottom of the contract. "Excellent, excellent, my dear. That's all I need," the strange man said as the lights flickered again and went out for about 20 seconds this time. When they came back on, he was nowhere to be found. Very weird, I thought. Then it hit me. I'd never told him my greatest fear was being alone in the dark, or that my name was Jill. Strange night indeed. But I had to close up shop soon and put the entire affair out of my mind for the time being. Before long, it was 3 a.m., and I had finally finished my shift at the Golden Skull Saloon and headed towards my car in the pub's parking lot. By now, a massive storm had blown in, and lightning crackled as the wind whipped at me sideways. I was about halfway to my car when I heard what sounded like a voice echoing in the storm. "I have something for you," it said in a sinister, malicious tone. I stopped and looked around the dark parking lot, but saw nothing. Then the voice came again. "Something you'll never forget." Thoroughly creeped out, I ran towards my car, but as I did, it was as if the entire night darkened even further. I could barely see in front of me. The darkness fell heavily upon me. I couldn't even see the streetlights anymore. Something was terribly wrong, and I quickly jumped in my car. Just then, it felt like something slammed into the side of it, rocking my car back and forth. What the hell was going on? My car continued to rock back and forth as shadowy figures seemed to grow closer all around me in the dark night. This cannot be happening, I thought, and tried to start the engine. Nothing. Again, the dark shadows loomed closer. I felt like a little girl again, afraid of the dark, hiding under the covers, but this was real. The inky darkness pressed against the windows of my car. I closed my eyes in fright as the car continued to be rocked from all sides. Then I heard my phone ring. I looked down to see that it was a call from my grandma. I reached out to answer, but the battery went dead. I took in a deep breath, trying to steady myself, when I suddenly felt cold hands wrap around my neck from the back seat. I began to choke and cough, but it was no use. Before I knew it, everything faded to black. I awoke the next morning on my couch in my tiny apartment, not knowing how I got home, to the sound of someone knocking loudly at the door. Hesitantly, I got up and answered the door. Standing before me was a man in a black suit with an envelope. "Miss Jill Hawthorne, is it?" asked the man, handing me the envelope. "Yes, that's me. What's this about?" I asked. The man looked down at his polished shoes, then back at me. "I regret to inform you that your grandma has passed away last night." I stared at the man in shock. That couldn't be. She tried phoning me last night, hadn't she? "I know this is unfortunate news, but as a state executor to her will, I must also inform you that she left you inheritance of $127,000. I didn't know what to say as tears spilled down my cheeks. $127,000? Why, that was the exact amount of money I needed to pay off my student debt loan. The man nodded solemnly and walked away. A few days later, I had to work my day shift at the pub, and though my heart hurt, getting back into a routine would do me good, I thought. As I entered the pub, I noticed something peculiar. Lining the one wall was picture after picture of old patrons that had frequented the pub going back to the 1950s. I'd never really paid the photos any mind before. One stuck out like a sore thumb. It was the strange man with the hypnotic blue eyes from the terrible night that had convinced me to sign his strange contract. Under the picture it said, Jack Toneri, 1898 to 1954. No way! This was the same guy. What was going on? My boss, Roger, noticed me stare at the old picture and came over. Ah, one of the old-timers from back in the day when my grandpa used to run the pub, Jill, he explained. I never got to meet Jack, but apparently he was quite the character. Loved his martinis and flamboyant suits. Some say he worked for the mob as a debt collector. Used to get people who owed the mob money to sign elaborate contracts. Heh, can you believe that? A mobster with a flair for legal matters? I didn't know how to respond. This was the man with the offer I could not refuse. My God, what had I done by signing his contract? He'd said all I had to do was face my greatest fears and all my worries would go away, when in reality, my grandma died and I got the money I needed to clear my loans, but really, at what cost in the end? The tale I'm about to tell is all true, every single word. If I hadn't lived through it myself, I probably wouldn't believe it. But sometimes, truth is stranger than fiction. It all happened back in 2004. My family had recently moved into an older home built in the 60s. At first things were fine, but as the weeks went on, more and more weird things would happen and come to transpire, ultimately culminating in the greatest tragedy of my life. Like I said, we had moved into our new to us forever home in 2004. Me age 12, my little brother age 10, shared a big room with a large wooden walk-in closet with those doors that slide open on rollers. Very retro. The second night in our room was when it truly began. I think it was around 1 a.m. when I woke out of my slumber hearing scratching sounds coming from the closet. At first I was still half asleep and unsure of myself, but the longer I listened, the more I was convinced something was in the closet. I looked towards my little brother's bed, only to see he remained fast asleep, unbothered by the strange sounds. Eventually it stopped and I fell back asleep. A week later, same time at night, I was awoken to the sound of the scratching noise again, this time louder, as if nails were scratching the closet door. I peered through the shadows of our room, but couldn't see anything in the murky darkness of night. Then slowly I heard one of the closet doors open. Again, I narrowed my eyes in a feeble attempt to see what was going on, but only shadows were to be seen. The scratching abruptly ceased, and then the door was slowly closed. All the while, my little brother remained asleep and oblivious of the strange occurrences. I tried talking to my parents about what I had witnessed, but it was to no avail. They merely said I was having a vivid dream and to pay it no mind, or there was an old house possibly just settling in the night. But I know what I saw and heard were too real to be ignored. Something strange was going on in this house, and especially in my bedroom. The following week is when I truly lost all control. Again, late at night, again the scratching noises followed by the closet door slowly creeping open. This time about halfway, and then from the closet I heard a low guttural voice speak. Who would like to play a game with me? I froze in terror at that, blinking my eyes rapidly and clutching at my covers. This time when I looked towards my brother's bed, his eyes were also wide open and filled with fright. We both looked towards the closet. My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest from the fear. What was something actually in our closet and talking to us? This cannot be real. Perhaps my father was playing a sick prank. Slowly the closet door started to close again, and the voice trailed off. Oh, the fun games we could play! I lay there paralyzed with dread in my bed, all night long, not falling back to sleep until dawn broke. The next day I asked my brother if he'd heard the voice in our room too, and he just nodded, still too afraid to acknowledge what had happened. I knew talking to my parents would be useless, so I left alone. But I did hatch a plan that my 12-year-old brain thought would work. That night before bed, I slept with my baseball bat, and my brother had an old tennis racket. If whoever was lurking in the closet came back again or tried to do anything, we would be ready to at least fight back. That night around 1 a.m., the familiar strangeness began, but this time after asking, "Who would like to play a game with me?" the creepy voice continued with, It's called counting sheep forever. I tried to rise up from my bed, but was again paralyzed with fear. The doors of the closet opened fully this time. I looked over to see my brother as wide-eyed as myself. This hideous man, who must have stood at least 7 feet tall, emerged. His limbs were long and gangly, and his clawed hands dragged on the floor. His nose was long and crooked, and his teeth were yellowed and rotting looking. He looked at us and smiled malevolently. Again I tried to move, but nothing. His long, greasy black hair trailed down his back as he limped closer and closer to our beds. I closed my eyes, not wanting to witness this monster. Then I heard strange whispering in the room and looked over to see the man thing crouching over top of my brother, speaking some foreign tongue directly into his ear. I tried to scream, but only a whimper came out. The ugly man turned towards me with glowing red eyes and said, Go to sleep! And that was the last thing I remembered before fainting out of pure terror. The next morning, I woke to find the closet door closed and my brother still fast asleep. At the time, I thought nothing of it and went downstairs to have breakfast. After about 2 hours and realizing my brother still hadn't come down, my parents sent me to go check on him. I walked into our room to find him blissfully still sleeping. I tried to rouse him, but to no effect. I shook his shoulders, nothing. I yelled loudly for him to wake up, nothing. Finally, I called for my parents and tried to wake him in vain. Eventually, my parents took my little brother to the hospital, where the doctors came to the conclusion that somehow he had fallen into a deep coma. Other than that, he was in perfect health. This all happened in 2004, and to this day my little brother still lays in a hospital bed in a permanent coma state. The creepy closet man or demon or whatever it was never returned to terrorize me ever again, and to this day I have no idea what it did to my brother to end up in a coma for the rest of his life. Counting sheep forever!
We hope you enjoyed these deliciously scary tales. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Ta-ta for now.